Hello viewers, I'm Ron and you're watching 284 Media out of Tortola in the beautiful British Virgin Islands. Good evening and thank you so much for joining me for this very special report. The HLSCC Community College recently appointed Mrs. Sandy Harrigan-Underhill as its first director for the HLSCC Institute of Education. As director of the Institute, Mrs. Harrigan-Underhill will work collaboratively with the Ministry of Education to, of course, advance their mandates as it relates to the education training needs for the territory of the Virgin Islands. Now, a primary function, viewers, of the Institute will be to work closely with the territory's schools, both public and private, through the Ministry of Education to obtain data that will inform decisions about the territory's education training needs. In her role as director, Mrs. Underhill will also serve as an ambassador for education training locally, regionally, and of course, internationally. She is responsible for garnering support for the Institute that will build strong partnerships in advancing the vision of the Institute and of course, lead the facilitation of training and education that is research-driven, innovative, and reflect current best practices within education. Mrs. Harrigan-Underhill brings with her some 27 years of experience with education and 10 years of experience in progressive leadership positions. She has experience with the business change management consulting to, of course, include policy implementation, human capital, and systems development. She is highly experienced in curriculum planning and development as well as instruction at various levels, including tertiary. Prior to her appointment as director, Mrs. Harrigan-Underhill served as the principal of the Elmore Stout High School from 2014 to 2019. Viewers, I am honored to be joined by the first director of the HLSCC Institute of Education. When we return, we put the program into perspective. All this and so much more after a quick word from our sponsors.
Yo, everything good, Dad?
Aye. This thing got me one way, Daddy.
What you mean?
Ever since I hook up with this thing, can't eat, I can't sleep. This is the first thing I touch it when I reach home.
What you really? Hey, this ain't like you, you know.
Dad, this thing got me staying home, keeping out that trouble me.
Wow. What your name is?
Shit, I talking about my CCT life.
Don't worry about missing your favorite series, sports, news, and local programming. Come to CCT today and sign up for CCT Live to access over 80 channels. CCT Live. Bring it home.
1 month free trial turn into 5. 5 months turn into, well, you know I huff. I watching ball. I been watching football. Dad, Nickelodeon, Paw Patrol. I am hooked. Hook, I tell you.
Viewers, welcome back and thank you so much for sticking with us. Once again, I'm Ron and you're watching 284 Media. As promised, I am joined by Director Mrs. Sandy Harrigan-Underhill. Director Underhill, thank you so much for your time and of course, welcome back to 284 Media.
Thank you so much for having me, Ron. Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
Absolutely. Now, of course, we have heard much about the Education Institute at the HLSCC Community College, which you are now heading. I want to ask you to begin by giving us a background and really the rationale behind the program.
So the newly established Institute of Education at HLSCC has been an initiative that has been a long time coming and discussed. I remember being a principal and being a part of a small group who were discussing the way forward as relates to this institution. Basically, this institution endeavors to provide training from various aspects as it relates to educators, not just in the area of professional development, but we want to be able to fully develop degree programs. We want to be able to look at teachers who are in service, currently in service teachers, with content-only degrees and provide the requisite training to get them to where they need to be as far as educator-based training. And also we want to be able to expand our horizons to pre-service persons who may be interested in education outside of the current education system. We want to be able to provide degree programs for those persons as well. A huge part of our endeavor is to ensure that our programming is research-based. It's data-driven and research-based. And so in keeping with that endeavor, we want to be able to establish a research component to the institution So that's just to give you a little bit of background. We envision and we see ourselves within the next decade or less to be the institution of choice in the region, not just in our territory, but in the region when it comes to educator-based training.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations to you and your team at the HLSCC Stout Community College for really finally being able to kickstart the program. I want to talk about the vision and mission and get into some of the goals of the Institute. Can you share with us the vision and mission of the Institute as well as some of your upcoming goals?
So again, our vision, we envision ourselves to be the institution that provides or facilitates teaching excellence, training across the spectrum when it comes to teaching excellence, beginning with professional development, content for teachers with content-only training, as I mentioned before, and degree programming. We want to make sure that a lot of what we do is also aligned with regional goals. For instance, CARICOM standards for teacher training, OECS standards for teacher training, and UNESCO standards when it comes to teacher training as well. And I say that is very important because we envision ourselves as part of participating in the global debate when it comes to educator training at some point in the future. So as we are in the initial stages, we are planning for programming. We are proposing a phased approach to our opening, again, because a lot of what we are doing right now is based on available resources. So we are in the planning stages, and what we are endeavoring to do is to begin with professional development for in-service teachers. We're working very, very closely with the Ministry of Education to identify the urgent areas of need with respect to educator training. So I am happy to announce that we are starting our very first professional development next
Wonderful.
week, March 9th. Promises to be a 4-week course from March 9th to April 1st for K through 2 in our current education system, that is K through 2 in special education. And we are happy that we are able to begin our programming to coincide with Education Week, which is March 13th through the 19th. That shortly should be followed by training in early childhood development, which is another area of critical need for us in our territory. We have a few challenges there, but being that most of the institutions are private schools, but we are reaching out to them to try to garner their interest, their support, and make sure that we give them certain incentives to let them know that they are welcome and that we are also catering to that market. So that would be the next set of sessions that we are offering, and I want to say those sessions will be after the Easter holiday. I don't want to give any specific dates, but we're looking around April 19th to start a session in early childhood development. And then that will also follow tertiary level, which is very important because as we sit and we plan, we also have to make sure that we include lecturers at the college as part of our training. So we are also planning for tertiary level educators as well as we speak.
I must ask you, because you mentioned about the public and private partnership, both with the private schools. How important would you say that partnership is in not only the success of this program, but essentially the success of educators across the board in the BVI?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'm happy to announce that one of the very first tasks that I accomplished in I would want to say my second week on the job was to work closely with the HLSCC administration to establish an advisory committee for the Institute of Education. So this advisory committee consists of persons, educators, currently in the field of education who represent all avenues from private to public, but not just private and the public school sectors. They also at various levels of education. So we have a person who represents early childhood. We have someone in the primary, we have secondary, tertiary, but not just levels. We also went as far as ensuring that we have representation from our sister islands and from the private schools. Also a representative from the special education, because special education is a very, very critical
Absolutely.
area in education. So we have someone on that advisory committee. So as you talk about the important role of the partnerships, this committee is structured and symbolizes that partnership. And as we work together to advance the vision, mission, and goals of the institution. It is this very advisory committee that is going to guide and inform a lot of our decisions. So as you see from the very beginning, we are looking to the future and we are basing it on a strong foundation of partnerships.
Wonderful. Now, I want to go into detail a bit, if you are at liberty to do so, when it comes to the course offerings for education-based training. Can you tell us a little bit about the course offerings?
So right now, we are, again, doing professional development. Professional development courses that we are running first is in special education. Then for early childhood, we have 2 upcoming courses, as I mentioned, after the Easter break, which will be on characteristics of early childhood 1, 2, and social and emotional development. That's another critical area. Followed by the tertiary level, we are going to be offering various elements of measurement and evaluation, Bloom's taxonomy, rubric writing, test writing, assessment writing, tables of specifications. And these topics, again, it's very important to mention here that in our planning, we work very closely with the Ministry of Education and all other stakeholders. And what do I mean by that? Our decisions are guided by data that comes from the ministry. So I'm not just sitting and deciding, based on my experience, I think we need to do X, Y, or Z. The information is coming from the Ministry of Education based on their data, on their critical areas of need in the various levels, as I mentioned before, from early childhood, primary, secondary, and so forth. And then on the tertiary level, I have met with some of the HODs and deans of education at the HLSCC Community College who have informed me of their areas of critical need. And from that information, we put together programming. In the upcoming future, we are looking to offer content for teachers who have content-only degrees, training in education.
Okay.
And so data about that, again, is going to be a collaborative effort between HLSCC and the Ministry of Education in terms of what it is we need teachers to learn to get them education-based trained. As far as degree programming, our very first offerings we are endeavoring to do in the spring of 2023, and that is more than likely going to take shape in partnership with our partner institutions who we have already established memorandums of understanding with. I can't mention any names as yet because relationships and all the details and arrangements have not been worked out in terms of logistics. But we are endeavoring to offer our first degree program, bachelor's degrees, to be followed by masters in education in partnership with partner institutions.
I want to talk, of course, you mentioned that you can't give names of the regional and international partnership, but one of the main factors of your role is really garnering support for the Institute, not only locally, but regionally and internationally. When we look across the region and we really put education at the forefront of our communities, what would you say that partnership across the region will look like essentially in getting the BVI and this program to the next level? Well, the partnership has to begin with a lot of local marketing first. We need to get our name. We need the name of the institution out there. We need to be able to have a robust marketing strategy. We've already started working on just such a plan. Okay. And also we have to strengthen our relationships with universities like University of the Virgin Islands, UWI. I know that we already have a strong relationship there, especially with respect to education. But not just limit ourselves to the regional institutions. We need to aspire and endeavor to even enter onto the global stage when it comes to educator training. So again, it has to do with marketing. It has to do with making sure that we make those connections. We identify institutions that have the highest quality of education training, and that we try our very best, make our very best efforts to link ourselves with these type of institutions for the purpose of networking and advancing the goals of the institution. Now, there is a research unit to begin initiative in collaboration with the agency, that's ECJBTE. Can you speak about that unit?
So that's the Eastern Caribbean Joint Board for Teacher Education,
Okay.
of which the HLSCC is a part of, and there are members from the Ministry of Education. I want to say the CEO, the Deputy CEO, and other persons from HLSCC, including myself. We are also a part of that joint board. We meet monthly, I want to say quarterly for now. And what that body has done recently is it has begun a research initiative of which we decided that it would be a very good opportunity for the institution to be a part of. So they came out with the initiative, I want to say early this year, and invited all member countries to be a part of this proposal for research. And we took this grand step, a huge step, very ambitious step, to propose a research topic. And I went ahead and did that. We figured it would be a good place to start for the institution to partner with something that is already established. They have created a center for research, which promises to be a repository for persons looking for any kind of information on education. So again, I know your next question is going to be, what is my role? So I've proposed, along with other persons at HLSCC who are my supporting team, a topic that promises to identify the gaps in education, particularly as it relates to gaps that were identified during the COVID era.
Yes.
I think it's very important for us to, I don't want to say too much about the topic, but it's very relevant because it talks about gaps identified during COVID, especially as it relates to the virtual classroom. As we know, while we had to rush and create a new type of tradition of learning for students, we also were faced, as although I wasn't teaching at the time, but I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of past colleagues and even students along the way who have identified some of the challenges. And so I thought it would be very fitting for us to begin there, to start to look at the gaps identified and how we can address them even through some of the training that we will be offering via the institution in the future. So that will be some of the first body of research that will come out of the institution.
Now, as you mentioned, the COVID era and all the challenges that have come with that, holistically, when you consider education, what are some of the challenges that you could share with us that you and your team wish to tackle through the Education Institute?
So whenever we talk about challenges in education, we have to look at it from two lenses. You have educators who work so hard and oftentimes are forgotten. We have a lot of educators who stepped up to the plate and they met the challenge. However, some of them were not quite ready, no fault of theirs. And so these things became prevalent throughout the virtual classroom and that whole era of teaching online. Teachers who were very, very stressed because of maybe the lack of knowledge when it comes to the technological aspect of it. And while I like to say that I am somewhat technologically savvy, I understand completely how a lot of them felt, because I too, there's so much to learn when it comes to technology.
Yes.
And so they had to step up to the plate and learn, and that created its own dynamic of stresses and anxiety. And that's just one aspect and one area. You have attendance being an issue. How do we get students how do we ensure that our students are attending and that they're actually engaged, not just in attendance, but they actually engage in the process of teaching and learning. So a lot of that type from the teacher perspective. And then you have from the student perspective, and I always think about special education. In general, I always, and again, this is just anecdotal, nothing to qualify.
Of course.
You have overachievers who I believe will thrive in just about every setting or any setting. But then you also have the in-between and then the underachievers, and who you already were challenged with in your regular traditional classroom. what happened. The question is what happens to them in the virtual classroom. And then you have your special education category of students who would have been receiving special services in the traditional classroom. And while I'm sure that the ministry and educators alike did everything in their power to ensure that a lot of those things went interrupted, some of it was impossible, and we have to be real about that. And so the question remains now, what happened to those children during the COVID era that we are still in as we speak today? So quite a number of challenges there, not just for special education, but just across the board. And these are things that we need to, as educators, keep in mind as we plan and new initiatives for education, and we strive for education excellence overall in our territory.
Beautiful. I must ask you though, a part of the number of programs, training programs, we do, I believe, based on the outline, we'll be offering trainings to principals as well, making sure that principals are up to speed as it pertains to their qualifications. Can you speak to that program for principals specifically?
So as I sat to do my planning, particularly as it relates to professional development, I thought it was important that we provide professional development opportunities that is categorized. Of course, as we go through and we advance the initiatives, there will be overlaps, meaning that some persons may fit more than one cohort or more than one area. But we thought it was important for us to categorize based on levels. As I mentioned before, you have offerings for early childhood, primary, secondary, and then we have what we call principal leaders, which I am very passionate about. When I look at principals and leadership, a lot comes to mind, and I suppose for me it comes to mind that way because of my personal experience as a leader. I always joked and told persons close to me that I never really considered myself as your typical principal because of the nature of the challenges that I faced from 2014 when I took the helm at Elmo Stout High School. So I say that to say the many challenges, including after the hurricane, including the floods right before the hurricane, and how as a leader you had to step up to the plate and look at leadership quite differently from your traditional lenses. So again, when I think about principles and leadership, I think it's important to be able to first ensure that they are included, ensure that there are robust programs that are developed for them, and a lot of the programming, at least in the initial stages, will be geared towards looking at leadership through different lenses, being a leader who is ready to face any difficulty and any challenge in your education setting. So those are some of the ideas that we are coming up with in terms of initial offerings for our principal leaders.
Understood, and thank you so much for clarifying that. We are excited. I think the general public is definitely excited to have the program take off. But I want you to speak in closing to the teachers who will actually be participating and joining the Institute. Of course, they make the program essentially by becoming a part of it and receiving the training. I want you to speak to them, and for many of them who might be coming into it as first time experiencing that level of training, what do you say to them as it pertains to the success of the program and their success as teachers? What do you want them to come into it bearing in mind?
So if I had the opportunity to speak to educators, I would like to just share with them my passion for education, that we are excited about our program offerings. Again, I want you to be very patient with us as we work to develop these programs. It is a very new institution, and as I said, we're partnering with the ministry and other stakeholders to make sure that we offer opportunities based on the identified needs. But basically to say to the educators that it's been a stressful time. It's been a stressful, we can even say decade or beyond. And so I want them to know that this institution endeavors and aspires to be a place that offers opportunities to perfect your craft, to improve your craft. But I also, Ron, want to say here that it's very important to note that while we may do an outstanding job or mediocre job, or whatever you want to describe it as in terms of developing programs for this institution, we have to also endeavor and aspire to ensure that there are standards set, there are policies in place that seeks to recruit, to attract, recruit, and retain the best of the best when it comes to education. We also just not want to talk about hiring the best of the best, but we also want to match that with remuneration. We want to ensure that teachers are compensated accordingly. And I say that without any apology, because this is the time we have got to come to this realization that education is the foundation of everything that is going to be good for the future advancement of our country. Yes, we don't get an immediate gratification in terms of money.
Yes.
But the gratification in the future, the benefit in the future, the value in the future far outweighs anything. And we need to start looking at education through different lenses and put more money and resources in education. And it begins with making sure that a package for attracting a teacher has to have a salary figure that is attractive. And without any apology, that is just the way it goes. All of these things are going to work hand in hand in even incentivizing persons who are pre-service to come into the field of education, in-service teachers to want to be trained and to be lifelong learners when it comes to education. These are the kinds of things that we must address, even for this institution to take off and to be successful.
I could not agree with you more, and I thank you so much for your honesty and authenticity in sharing those sentiments. I want to congratulate you on your appointment, of course, and more so you and your team at the Education Institute. We wish you all the best in the endeavors in really moving the program forward. I believe the general public is quite happy to see the program finally come to fruition. Ms. Underhill, I cannot let you go without asking you, my residents, the people of the BVI would not like it if I let you go. The last time we saw you, apart from your position as principal of the Elmore Stout High School, in the last general election, you presented yourself as a candidate, as an at-large candidate, and my record says that you received some 2,400 plus votes. Many persons are wondering with your recent appointment whether or not you will be presenting yourself once more as a candidate in our next general elections. Can you speak to that?
So anyone who knows me knows I keep it real. And this is what I am going to say to you. As a career educator, what I've always wanted for my students was for them to reach their maximum potential. And I would like to say that in all honesty, if I was to be the true, authentic person that I aspire to be, I too should want that for myself. So I say that to say that as I continue in my lifelong journey, I continue to pray and seek guidance and wisdom that the good Lord will order my steps. I am happy and excited to be in the role that I am, to be in the capacity of the director of the newly established HLSCC Institute of Education. I think it's an exciting opportunity to be a part of something that's newly developed and growing. However, I am still seeking guidance. And wherever the Lord leads me, that's where I will go.
Fair enough. Thank you for that response, and I appreciate your time today. Viewers, you heard it here first from the one and only Ms. Sandy Harrigan-Underhill, the territory's first director for the HLSCC Institute of Education. It has been a pleasure, and I thank you so much for joining me once again for this special report. You've been watching 284 Media out of Tortola in the beautiful British Virgin Islands. I'm Ron Grant. It is always a pleasure. Have a beautiful rest of the evening. Bye-bye.